I get tips from people as to where there might be something hiding, and then sometimes I'll just take a day and just go searching.
2022 was a difficult year for Danny Koker. Not only was he dealing with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, but also struggling with severe weight loss from stress and a marriage on the rocks. With so many problems piling up, many believed the end of counting cars had taken all hopes for a better future along with it. But fast forward to 2026, and we have a story of survival and restoration. What happened to Danny Koker during that time, and how was he able to get his life back? Join us as we explore the true story of his life after counting cars. Life before the world took notice. With a long ride of success and controversies laying ahead, Danny Koker was born on January 5, 1964, in Cleveland, Ohio. But thanks to the nature of his parents' work, he hardly stayed there as a child, constantly moving instead between Cleveland and Detroit. Back in the 60s and 70s, these two places had something in common, and that was automotive culture. Having a car was then equal to having an identity, and Detroit was the manufacturing capital of the world. For a boy growing up in a family tied directly to Ford Motor Company, it was only a matter of time before the same passion grabbed a hold on him. But before that happened, young Danny Koker had another interesting thing going for him, and that was music. His father, Danny Koker Sr., wasn't just an automotive executive, but also a talented musician who sang and played keyboard for the Cathedral Quartet, a well-known Southern music group. That combination of engines and melody ran through the household like a current, and young Danny absorbed both. At age 7, he was already decent with playing the piano and guitar, but the turning moment came sometime around his 8th birthday when Danny got a motorcycle from his father. Within a few days, little Danny had slowly taken it apart until the pieces were all spread out on the garage floor. Then he slowly put it back together before taking it apart once again, just to understand how it worked. Despite this, the separate worlds of music and machines coexisted as he grew older, and for good reason. His family performed at places like Carnegie Hall, and at just 11 years old, Danny himself stood on that stage and performed in front of a live audience, this time not as a bystander, but as a participant in his own right. And though he performed with them on stage for over 3 years, Danny quickly found his niche in rock music and formed his own band later on. A few years earlier, Danny had moved over to Las Vegas, where his family had connections to the local television scene. This network at the time needed low-budget programming to stay afloat, and Danny Koker, now used to being in camera, stepped into the limelight once again as a Dracula-inspired late-night horror host. On that first night, the Count was born, a name that would identify his brand for decades. Dressed in a cape and sunglasses with a strong European accent and the fangs of a vampire, Danny's Count Cool Rider ran the Saturday Fright at the Movies show from 1990 to 2001, hosting multiple horror movies and science fiction cult classics. But unbeknownst to everyone, something much bigger was unfolding in the background. For those 11 years, Danny had quickly developed a knack for restoring old cars to classic beauties. Better yet, he did it for fun, and soon enough, these personal passion projects became huge favors for close friends. Thanks to word of mouth, this hobby slowly grew into a thriving business for local clients. Without a corporate launch, press release, or grand opening, the Count had become widely known and respected in the local driving communities of Vegas, and from that fame, Count's Customs was born. By 2009, word of mouth about his expertise had spread so far that History Channel was bringing him in for expert cameos on their famous show, Pawn Stars, with his first appearance airing on July 19th of that year. He was the expert Rick Harrison called when a rare motorcycle or classic car rolled into the shop and nobody in the building had an idea what they were looking at. Though he was never introduced as a star, Danny's character was everything the fans wanted in the show: confident, unpredictable, and charismatic. It didn't take many episodes to notice that his presence and input alone had caused spikes in the program's reviews and ratings, causing the producers to consider doing a spin-off show centered around him. This idea came at the right time when Pawn Stars was already growing into a universe of different successful shows and specials like American Restoration. For History Channel, Danny fit the formula so well. He was a man who wasn't just restoring old cars, but actively hunting them. He would spot an old car on the street and stop at nothing to get it. From sudden cash negotiations to spontaneous contracts and follow-throughs, his personal life already had all the elements necessary for a more grounded but thrilling reality show. So in 2012, the History Channel made a big decision. A decision that would change Danny's life forever. Counting Cars and Controversies. On August 13, 2012, Counting Cars premiered on History Channel. The show was set inside Count's Customs in Las Vegas, filming Koker and his crew as they hunted down, restored, and flipped vehicles most people had long scrapped. Each episode brought something unique to the table, whether it was a 1968 Ford Mustang, a generic rusted shell in a dump close by, or a dune buggy from the 70s sitting at a neighbor's backyard. Count's Customs always had the right fix. The formula worked very well from the first episode, drawing in 3.1 million viewers. For a spin-off show, this was a remarkable start, and it didn't take long for Counting Cars to carve out its own identity. It was different from the others in many ways, and viewers loved it. Contrary to later controversies, it was confirmed by the showrunners years later that many scenes in the show weren't scripted. Like the times when he bought cars on impulse, chased unsuspecting owners down the streets, or negotiated the biggest deals on the spot with huge amounts of cash in hand. With many unexpected things happening in each episode, it wasn't surprising when the show got popular enough to host leading celebrities like Alice Cooper, who appeared as both a fan and a client, drawn in by Danny's reputation rather than a casting call. When Season 4 came to a close, Counting Cars had become one of History Channel's biggest hits. 10 seasons and 222 episodes later, it reached heights no spin-off on the network had ever achieved. But as we'll see, it didn't take long before the cracks began to show. In December 2013, barely a year after the show premiered, Danny Koker was pulled over by authorities for allegedly driving under the influence. Interestingly enough, blood tests came back clean with no alcohol or drugs in his bloodstream. The charges were dropped, but the damage wasn't entirely undone. In a world where perception moves faster than facts, the headline had already traveled. His name was cleared, but a different kind of vulnerability was exposed. Now, the man behind the brand was now under scrutiny, and anything he did easily affected the show. And now, a different kind of controversy was about to make that painfully clear. By late 2014, a Las Vegas couple filed a $50,000 lawsuit against Count's Customs over the restoration of a 1967 Mustang. Apparently, there were unmet expectations that never materialized, contrary to the scenes acted out on camera. And though the issue seemed simple on paper, the case was so sensitive that many details had to be settled quietly. But then came a deeper internal problem. In 2017, attention turned inward when a former employee was accused of stealing from the company. This wasn't a slight swipe, but a massive scandal involving manipulated timesheets, false overtime, and an estimated $75,000 disappearing directly from company accounts. These funds were traced to personal purchases, including a Range Rover and airline tickets. This case involving Danny Koker, attracted the attention of financial authorities and triggered an $188,000 IRS penalty that landed squarely on the shop. Yet that was just the start of their troubles. Even though it was widely known back in 2018 that reality television was a soft mix of real events and drama, Counting Cars was specially criticized for reports telling about how the producers always pushed for needless arguments and deadlines in each episode of the later seasons. Danny was someone who prided himself in spontaneity and instinct, so he resisted and always pushed for scenes to go back to how they were when the show first started. But with executives pushing for more drama and higher returns in upcoming seasons, every episode had to play out like part of a soap opera, with needless conflict that veered away from the main substance of the show: restoring vehicles. What felt organic slowly began to feel engineered, even for the cast of the show. By 2019, Danny could hardly take it anymore, walking off set during filming and halting production at high costs for the show. Feedback on the exact reasons was varied. Some said it was because of frustration with the show's direction. Others believed it was fatigue from years of endless filming. Either way, the result was the same. But things got even more concerning when private moments began spilling into view. Married life for Koker back then almost felt like a bad dream. They were filmed yelling at each other at a public place, with his wife later admitting there were times she felt like a widow left behind because of the nature of her husband's job. Over the years, more problems kept piling up with lingering issues leading up to the dreaded year of 2020. From increasing financial pressures, lower network support, and legal fees yet to be paid, the final nail in the coffin seemed to be the global pandemic. By early 2021, the leading legal battles included customer overcharge suits from 17 former clients, totaling up to $2.7 million in claims, with legal fees alone potentially exceeding $1.2 million. History Channel considered canceling the show, but instead enforced rules stating that the next season should have at least 60% real content to keep viewers engaged. But Danny's health was deteriorating visibly. Fans who had followed him for years expressed open concern after recent photos showed a man who looked hollowed out. Danny Koker looked much thinner, drawn, and seemed tired and stressed out. He had lost over 35 pounds, the physical cost of years of pressure that had never fully let up. When the show concluded after the 10th season in December 2021, it didn't feel like a happy ending for most, but the final step in a gradual decline spanning over 3 years. In fact, it ended without a farewell or direct indication that it would be the final season. Fans were kept unsure, and while Danny Koker had made a name for himself, the future of his work and personal life were looking grim. With so many legal and health problems to deal with, would he be able to get his life back? Let's explore the answers. Rebuilding and returning to music. After the last scene wrapped in Counting Cars, Danny Koker did what nobody expected. While many fans hoped he would get a better contract from a more generous network so he could return to the limelight, the Count had something a lot different in mind. Instead of predictably walking away from the spotlight to retire to a quiet life, he chose to rebuild his presence on his own terms. He would do Counting Cars again, but this time it would be under a different name and would be subject to his control, direction, and platform. From early 2022, multiple networks were starting reruns of the show, while Koker was already back in the garage. Count's Customs stayed open with customers still walking in. Everything operated just as it always did in the past 11 years, except now there were no camera crews. For the first time in over a decade, the crew finally had the breathing space needed to operate as they wished. While some people left, the core team stayed. Michael Henry, the man who airbrushed panels and signature horned helmets, kept doing his work, this time posting clips of himself painting and assisting others. Among those he worked with was Ryan Evans, the lead painter behind the vibrant colors the old show had become known for. Shannon Eichow remained in fabrication, still working in motorcycles, although rarely seen on the screen. Kevin Mack, the man who was closest to Danny on screen for years, was already gone before the final episode had aired. By the last episode, he was no longer a regular appearance in the shop or on social media platforms. That silence from someone who had stood beside Danny for nearly a decade said more than any statement ever could, and fans showed concern. However, losses continued to land quietly outside the shop. Count's Vamped Rock Bar and Grill, the live music venue he had built with his wife Corey over 16 years before, was no longer in operation. As for the band, the final weeks at Vamped brought Night Ranger, members of Rat and Loverboy, through the doors. On June 28th, Counts 77 took the stage at that location for the last time. For the band, the lights went down and the doors closed. And though the venue had hosted hundreds of shows, launched his group into various tours, and served as proof of Danny's life beyond the garage, the lack of returns meant it had to go. The venue was listed for sale in 2025 with an asking price of $3.75 million. Knowing what that venue meant, going back almost a decade ago, according to Danny, many sad memories came to mind. Perhaps the biggest among them was the one he spoke about that happened shortly after Counting Cars aired its first season. Danny had just formed Counts 77 there as the lead singer, backed by a group of seasoned musicians from Las Vegas. The timing was deliberate, as he wanted to do music, and the new fame from the show had given him the platform to do it. To the surprise and cheer of fans, the band's debut album dropped in 2014. The project performed so well that it entered the Billboard Hard Rock chart at number 26. Their single, My Detroit, performed so well that it was picked up for radio. This was a huge deal for a band that hadn't toured before, and that changed in 2016 when they hit the road for the first time. 50 shows were performed across the United States, with total earnings going above $2 million. Shortly after the tour was over, it was announced that the band had started working on their second album, Soul Transfusion. This project arrived in 2017 and climbed to number 15 on the Billboard Hard Rock chart. Their next single, Summer of '77, reached number 22 on the mainstream rock chart. The band that started as a side project was now charting alongside the biggest names that had been in the industry for decades. Rocklahoma 2018 brought over 40,000 people into the crowd to watch them perform. By 2022, the band had released 4 albums in total and moved over 500,000 records. That same year, they launched the Counts Rock Cruise, an event where they, fans, and other classic rock bands performed together on a luxury ship. It sold out months in advance, and it did so every single time. Meanwhile, back in the classic auto scene, Danny was slowly but surely regaining recognition. One viral moment was in 2025 when a restored 1978 Lincoln Continental built by Counts Customs appeared at a charity auction connected to Steven Tyler's Janie's Fund. And though there were no cameras to film the build, it sold for $300,000. By late 2025, a 1962 Cadillac two-door coupe was already on the lift at Counts Customs. Destination, Steven Tyler's Janie's Fund charity auction, was in 2026, marking the second consecutive year Danny's crew had built something for that stage. By late 2025, Danny confirmed he was ready to return to television with ongoing negotiations with 2 leading networks about 3 separate shows. Though nothing came to light, Danny Koker was never a man who waited for things to happen. And wanting to do it on his own terms, he launched his podcast on March 31st. Named after his company, Count's Culture was produced in association with ITV America and filmed in Las Vegas. He didn't walk back in alone. Fellow Las Vegas rocker Stoney Curtis sat beside him as co-host. They had shared stages for decades, and now they were sharing a platform. The first episode featured Eddie Trunk and ran for about 90 minutes. The second featured rock industry veteran Chuck Brennan, while the third premiered on April 14th and featured MMA legend Randy Couture. The guest list kept expanding large enough to include former Kiss guitarist Bruce Kulick among those who followed. One conversation per episode, 1 week at a time. Meanwhile, Count's Customs had been quietly building a digital audience of its own, now with more than 50 million views across various platforms, with short clips of builds, walkthroughs, and event footage, keeping fans connected between every major announcement. Count's 77 kept performing too, playing live sets across Las Vegas venues even after Vamped had closed its doors. In November 2025, Danny and his team walked the floor at SEMA, the largest auto trade show in the world, and on March 31st, 2026, the Count Core studio on the lot at Count's Customs went live for the first time. After many years, Danny Koker finally had control and freedom on things that mattered most. And he still does today. So, what do you think? Has the Count done a great job of rebuilding after losing everything? Or is there still a long way to go from here? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, click on the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.